Arizona Territory, 1885. The raging river churned with muddy fury, swallowing everything in its path, including her. Sarah Holloway's lungs burned as the current dragged her deeper, her sodden dress becoming a watery shroud. This was how it would end, dismissed from her teaching position, fleeing a man who saw her as property, only to die alone in a nameless river. But then strong hands gripped her shoulders, pulling her from death's cold embrace. She gasped for air, coughing violently as rain pelted her face. Through blurred vision, she saw him, an Apache warrior, tall against the stormy sky, studying her with eyes that missed nothing. Could she trust this stranger when every white face had betrayed her? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 days earlier, Sarah Holloway stood ramrod straight before Headmistress Abernathy's massive oak desk, clutching the letter of dismissal in trembling hands. The crisp parchment felt like a death sentence. Moral turpitude, Miss Holloway. The older woman's voice dripped with rehearsed regret. The board's decision is final. Sarah's throat tightened. Because I refused William Blackwood's proposal? Because you led on the son of our most generous benefactor. Headmistress Abernathy adjusted her spectacles. Mr. Blackwood Sr. has been quite patient, considering. Patient? Sarah fought to keep her voice steady. His son cornered me in the supply closet. When I rejected his advances, he tore my dress and threatened. Enough! The headmistress slammed her palm on the desk. No one of consequence will believe such accusations. William Blackwood Jr. is offering you respectability despite your questionable background. The injustice burned in Sarah's chest. 2 years teaching at Prescott Ladies Academy, molding young minds, building a life thousands of miles from her Massachusetts hometown. All erased because she wouldn't submit to a man's unwanted attentions. You have until tomorrow to vacate the teacher's quarters. The headmistress returned to her ledger, dismissing Sarah without another glance. Outside, spring rain pelted the academy's red brick facade. Sarah clutched her collar against the chill, her mind racing. Where would she go? Her meager savings wouldn't last a month. There you are, my dear. The deep voice sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the weather. William Blackwood Jr. stood under the portico, twirling his walking stick. At 35, he cut a handsome figure in his tailored suit, if one ignored the coldness behind his smile. His father's copper mining fortune made him Prescott's most eligible bachelor, a status he wielded like a weapon. I heard the unfortunate news, he said, reaching for her hand. Sarah stepped back. Now you'll see reason. Our wedding can proceed next week. There will be no wedding, Mr. Blackwood. His smile vanished. Don't be foolish. You're ruined in this town. No decent establishment will hire you now. I'll manage. His fingers wrapped around her wrist, grip tightening until she winced. I've invested considerable time pursuing you, Miss Holloway. I don't appreciate seeing my investments depreciate. A passing groundskeeper nodded respectfully to William, deliberately ignoring Sarah's distress. She realized with grim clarity that no help would come. My father expects dinner with his future daughter-in-law tonight, William continued, voice softening to a public facade of gentility. He's arranged everything. The house on Granite Street is being prepared for us. Sarah forced a placid expression. Of course, I simply need to pack my belongings. His grip loosened, satisfaction evident in his smirk. I'll send a carriage at 7. That night, Sarah waited until the academy fell silent. By lamplight, she packed only essentials, one dress, undergarments, her mother's silver hairbrush, a cherished copy of Emerson's essays, and her teaching credentials. The $32 saved from her salary went into a pouch sewn inside her petticoat. California, she whispered to herself. Teaching positions were plentiful there, far from William's influence. If she could reach the westbound stage by morning, the floorboard outside her door creaked. Sarah extinguished her lamp and froze, heart hammering. Through the keyhole, she glimpsed young Betsy, the kitchen maid. Miss Holloway? Betsy's whisper barely carried through the door. Mr. Blackwood's men are watching the front gate. He told Mr. Jenkins you might try to leave. Of course, William would have anticipated her escape. There's another way, Betsy continued, through the gardener's shed. And miss, take this. She slipped a folded paper under the door. My cousin works at the livery. Show him this. He'll help. Sarah retrieved the note, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. Thank you, Betsy. Hurry now. Storm's coming. An hour later, mounted on a chestnut mare that technically belonged to the Blackwood mining office, Sarah rode west into the gathering darkness, the letter of dismissal left burning in her room's small stove. Behind her, Prescott's lights disappeared into the rain-soaked night. Ahead lay uncertainty, and perhaps, finally, freedom. The chestnut mare snorted as thunder rolled across the darkened sky. Sarah patted the animal's neck, soothing her while scanning the terrain ahead. 3 hours of hard riding had put distance between her and Prescott, but William would discover her absence by morning, and the horses too. Just a little farther, girl, she murmured. Rain plastered Sarah's hair to her face, her woolen traveling cloak offering minimal protection against the deluge. The western trail, barely visible in daylight, had dissolved into a treacherous mud slick. Each lightning flash revealed a landscape transformed by water, familiar landmarks drowned under torrential runoff. She thought of her parents, both taken by influenza 5 years earlier. Her father, a bookish professor with perpetually ink-stained fingers, had encouraged her teaching ambitions. Education is freedom, Sarah, he'd often said. A trained mind can never be truly imprisoned. Her mother, practical and determined, had sewn 100 handkerchiefs to sell so Sarah could afford the journey west. What would they think of her now? Unemployed, fleeing on a stolen horse, with nothing but a vague plan to reach California? They'd understand, she whispered into the wind. They'd taught her that survival sometimes required difficult choices. The mare stumbled, regained footing, then balked at continuing forward. Through the rain, Sarah saw why. The trail ahead disappeared into rushing water. The normally placid creek had swollen into a churning river that cut across her path. She dismounted, tugging gently at the reins. Come on, we'll find another way. 2 miles south, conditions were no better. The water ran wider, though seemingly less turbulent. Sarah squinted through the darkness. The opposite bank couldn't be more than 30 yards away. People forded rivers all the time. A memory surfaced, Mr. Blackwood Sr. boasting at a school function about how the spring floods made it impossible for his mine workers to desert their posts. Nature's perfect enforcer, he chuckled, cutting off every escape route west for weeks. If she waited for the waters to recede, William would find her. Sarah led the mare along the bank, searching for any narrowing in the current. An hour later, soaked to the bone and shivering violently, she found a spot where large boulders broke the water's flow, creating what appeared to be a shallower crossing. This is our chance, she told the horse, who tossed her head in evident disagreement. Sarah mounted, gripping the reins tightly. Forward now. Steady. The mare stepped reluctantly into the water. The first few yards proved manageable, the river reaching only to the animal's knees. Sarah allowed herself a moment of hope. Then they reached the main channel. The current slammed into them with physical force. The mare whinnied in panic, struggling to maintain footing on the slippery riverbed. Sarah leaned forward, whispering encouragements, her own heart hammering against her ribs. Halfway across, disaster struck. The horse's hoof slipped between underwater rocks. She pitched sideways with a terrified whinny, throwing Sarah from the saddle. The cold shocked the breath from Sarah's lungs. Her heavy skirts dragged her under instantly, the current tumbling her against rocks and debris. She fought to the surface, gasping, only to be pulled under again. In the chaos, she glimpsed the mare breaking free, swimming strongly toward the bank they'd left. Sarah felt a moment of relief for the animal, even as her own situation grew dire. Her head struck something hard. Pain exploded behind her eyes. The world narrowed to pinpricks of light against encroaching darkness. As consciousness faded, Sarah's thoughts weren't of William or her lost position or even her uncertain future. Instead, she remembered sitting in her father's study as a child, tracing her finger along maps of the American West, imagining the freedom of those vast, untamed spaces. "I almost made it," she thought as the river claimed her. Her body, limp now, continued its journey downstream, carried by the indifferent current around a bend where a solitary figure stood on the shore. Alert to the unusual shape tumbling through the floodwaters, Taze crouched beside the river, reading the muddy bank like a book. For horses had passed this way before the heaviest rains, unshod hooves heavily laden. The thieves who had raided his people's horse herd 3 days earlier. He touched the eagle feather secured to his leather vest, a talisman given by his grandfather for protection. The old man's words echoed in his memory. "The eagle sees all things clearly, even in storm." Taze needed that clarity now. At 32, he was the White Mountain Band's most skilled tracker, tasked with recovering the stolen horses before the thieves could sell them to settlers in the Northern Territories. The unexpected deluge had nearly erased their trail, but Taze had not earned his reputation by giving up easily. He straightened, scanning the opposite shore where tracks disappeared. The storm had paused momentarily, though dark clouds promised more rain soon. He would need to find shelter for the night. A flicker of movement downstream caught his attention. Something large tumbled in the current, too big for driftwood, too formless for a deer. When lightning illuminated the river again, Taze saw pale fabric billowing underwater like ghost flames. Person. Instinct overcame caution. Taze shed his weapons and outer garments, securing them quickly beneath a rocky overhang. He waded into the frigid water, timing his dive to intercept the body as it swept past his position. The current fought him, powerful and greedy. His strong arms cut through the churning water, lungs burning as he submerged to grasp the sodden form. His fingers caught fabric, then an arm. He pulled upward, breaking the surface with his burden. A woman, white, unconscious or dead. Taze dragged her to shore, laid her on flat ground, and pressed firmly on her back. Water gushed from her mouth. He turned her carefully, checking for breath. Nothing. He pressed on her chest, remembering how his cousin had once been revived after falling through winter ice. "Breathe," he commanded in Apache. Then in the broken English he had learned from traders. "Woman, breathe now." Suddenly she convulsed, coughing violently as river water expelled from her lungs. Her eyes fluttered but didn't open, alive but barely. Taze surveyed their surroundings. The nearest white settlement lay 2 days' ride north, impossible with the rivers flooded. His temporary camp was half a day's journey into the mountains. The woman would die of exposure if left here, but helping her meant delaying his mission. His people needed those horses. Winter had been harsh, and the band's survival depended on mobility for hunting. The U.S. cavalry had restricted their traditional territories, making each animal more precious. The woman coughed again, curling into herself. A large bruise darkened her temple. She would not survive the night without help. Taze had seen enough death. The white man's diseases had taken his wife and infant son 4 years earlier. The reservation agent had turned away their desperate pleas for medicine, claiming supplies were limited. By the time Taze returned with herbs from the mountains, they were beyond saving. He had vowed then never to refuse aid to any soul in need, regardless of skin color. Decision made, Taze gathered his belongings and fashioned a crude travois from branches and his outer shirt. He laid the unconscious woman upon it, covering her with his blanket. The eagle feather talisman he placed momentarily on her chest, a prayer for protection extending to them both. "The horse thieves have gained another day," he told the darkening sky in his native tongue. "But a life walks between worlds tonight. This takes precedence." He lifted the travois handles and began the arduous journey toward his camp, the woman's labored breathing keeping rhythm with his careful footsteps. Behind them, the storm resumed its fury, erasing their tracks and any evidence of the choice he had made. The eagle feather rose and fell with each of the woman's shallow breaths, a spirit wavering, but not yet ready to depart this world fire, smoke, unfamiliar smells. Sarah clawed her way back to consciousness through layers of confusion and pain. Her lungs ached with each breath, her throat raw as if scraped with sandpaper. She tried to open her eyes, finding only one would obey, the other, sealed shut by swelling. Where was she? Not drowned, not dead. Through her one functioning eye, she made out a rough stone ceiling illuminated by flickering light. A cave? She attempted to sit up, but dizziness forced her back down onto what felt like a bed of soft hides. Quiet now. The deep voice came from somewhere to her right. You hurt. Fear jolted through her as memory returned. The river, the drowning, the stranger who had pulled her from the water. With tremendous effort, Sarah turned her head toward the voice. An Apache man knelt beside a small fire, crushing leaves between smooth river stones. His long black hair hung in two braids, and he wore a mixture of native and Western clothing, buckskin leggings, a cotton shirt beneath a leather vest adorned with intricate beadwork. A knife hung at his belt, but his expression as he glanced at her held no malice. Where am I? Her voice emerged as a whisper. Safe place. He gestured to the cave around them. Storm still comes. River's big. Sarah tried again to rise, managing to prop herself on one elbow despite the pain radiating from her temple. You saved me? He nodded once, returning to his work with the plants. You drink soon. Help fever. Only then did Sarah realize she was shivering despite the fire's warmth. Her dress had been replaced with a long buckskin shirt and her legs wrapped in blankets. The realization that he had undressed her sent a flush of embarrassment through her feverish body. My clothes. Wet. Death in wet clothes. He looked up, reading her discomfort. I not look. Apache respect. Sarah wasn't certain she believed him, but her alternatives seemed limited. Thank you for saving me. He inclined his head slightly. I am Taze. He touched his chest, then gestured to her. Sarah. Sarah Holloway. She struggled to stay upright as another wave of dizziness washed over her. Sarah. He tested the name, then pointed to her head. You have bad hurt here. Sleep needed. I need to reach California. Even as she said it, Sarah recognized the absurdity. She could barely sit up, let alone travel. How far is the nearest town? Taze shook his head. No towns now. All water. He made flowing motions with his hands. Many days until paths clear. Panic fluttered in Sarah's chest. If the roads were impassable, William would be delayed in his pursuit. But so too was her escape. And here she lay, utterly dependent on this stranger's goodwill. Taze approached with a wooden cup containing steaming liquid. The pungent aroma made Sarah recoil. Drink. He offered the cup. Medicine. Sarah hesitated. For all she knew, the brew could be poison. But if he had wanted her dead, he could have simply left her in the river. With trembling hands, she accepted the cup. The bitter taste made her gag, but Taze's steady gaze compelled her to continue sipping. When she finished, he took the cup and returned to the fire. Why? She asked, the question that had plagued her since regaining consciousness. Why help me? Taze seemed to consider this, perhaps searching for the English words. All life has worth, he finally said. Apache way. Sarah hadn't expected such a philosophical response. The white settlers in Prescott spoke of the Apache as bloodthirsty savages. Yet this man had saved her without apparent motive. The herbs began to take effect, a drowsy warmth spreading through her limbs. As her eyelids grew heavy, Sarah watched Taze methodically prepare more medicine, his movements precise and practiced. Rest now, he said, noticing her struggle to stay awake. Tomorrow, strength comes. As Sarah drifted into healing sleep, one thought circled in her mind. She had spent 2 years teaching young ladies about a world she herself had barely experienced, and now that world had expanded in ways she could never have imagined. Morning brought clearer skies but no relief from their predicament. Sarah stood at the cave entrance, leaning heavily on a walking stick Taze had fashioned for her. Her body ached from the river's battering, but the herbal remedies had reduced her fever and the swelling around her eye. The landscape before her was transformed. What had likely been a gentle valley was now a vast, muddy lake. Distant hills that might have held settlements were cut off by the swollen waterways. All paths gone, Taze said, joining her at the entrance. He crouched and drew in the dirt with a stick, a crude map showing rivers, mountains, and small circles representing settlements. With quick strokes, he added wavy lines crossing every direct route. No way to white towns. Sarah's heart sank. How long before the waters recede? Taze shrugged. Many days. Maybe one moon. A month. William would surely be searching for her by now. His rage building with each passing day. Even if the floodwaters delayed him, eventually he would find her trail. I cannot stay here, she murmured, more to herself than her companion. Taze stood, squinting at something in the distance. Sarah followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual in the flooded landscape. Come. Look. He led her to a rocky outcropping that provided a better vantage point, pointing southwest toward a ridge. See there. Sarah strained to see what had captured his attention. Then she spotted it, movement along the distant hillside. Riders, 4 or 5 of them, picking their way carefully along the higher ground. Who would be out in these conditions? She wondered aloud. Taze's expression darkened. Men looking for something lost. He glanced at her. Or someone. A chill that had nothing to do with her recent illness ran through Sarah. Can they reach us here? Not today. Waters block them. He studied the riders a moment longer. But they searched the high paths. Smart hunters. They're looking for me, Sarah whispered. William Blackwood and his men. Taze didn't ask who William was or why he pursued her. Instead, he assessed their situation with practical efficiency. We cannot stay. Cave too easy to find when waters drop. Where can we go? You said all paths to settlements are blocked. My people camp in high mountains. He gestured toward the rugged peaks to the east. Hidden place. Safe from soldiers. Safe from floods. He paused, studying her face. Safe from men who hunt you. Sarah weighed her options, which were admittedly few. Return to Prescott and submit to William's control? Attempt to reach another settlement alone, injured and without supplies? Or trust this Apache man who had already saved her life once? Will your people welcome a white woman? She asked. A flicker of hesitation crossed Taze's features. Some will not, but you under my protection. Why would you protect me? You don't know me. I know enough. His dark eyes held hers steadily. You run from bad man. I help. Something in his simple declaration touched Sarah deeply. In Prescott, men of position and education had stood by while William threatened her. Yet this man, whom society would label a savage, offered protection without hesitation. How far to your camp? 1 day walking. Difficult path. He assessed her condition. You strong enough? Sarah straightened her spine, ignoring the protest of her bruised body. I'll manage. They gathered what little they had. Taze's weapons and tools, Sarah's salvaged boots, now mostly dried, and a small pouch containing the medicine herbs. Her dress, torn and mud-stained, was beyond saving. She would have to travel in the buckskin shirt and an extra pair of Taze's leggings, tied with strips of rawhide to fit her smaller frame. As they prepared to leave, Taze spotted a waterlogged book among the debris he'd pulled from the river along with Sarah. He handed the sodden mass to her. Yours. Sarah carefully separated a few pages of her teaching journal, most of the ink washed away, the wisdom and lesson plans of 2 years reduced to pulpy fragments. She tucked a single salvageable page into her borrowed clothing. A piece of who I was, she said simply. Taze nodded as if he understood completely. Come. We go before hunters find our trail. Together they set off toward the mountains, leaving the cave and the flooded valley behind. Sarah limping but determined, Taze patient and alert, both aware that the riders on the distant ridge represented a threat neither could afford to underestimate. The journey proved more arduous than Sarah had anticipated. What Taze called a path was often little more than a game trail clinging to steep mountainsides. By midday, her legs trembled with exhaustion, and her lungs burned in the thin air. Still, she pressed on without complaint, determined not to become more of a burden than she already was. Taze moved with the easy grace of one born to this rugged terrain, occasionally doubling back to offer a steadying hand at difficult passages. Though they spoke little, Sarah found herself drawing strength from his quiet confidence. Late afternoon brought them to a small plateau nestled between towering pines. Ahead, thin wisps of smoke rose from what appeared to be a collection of hide-covered dwellings. Wiki-ups, Sarah recalled from her limited reading on native dwellings. Taze paused, turning to her with unusual hesitation. "My people there. Must speak before we go." Something in his tone sent a flutter of apprehension through her. "Is there a problem?" He chose his words carefully. "Apache ways. Different from white ways. Women who are not family cannot stay in camp unless—" He faltered, searching for the right English words. "Unless what?" "Unless they are wife." He met her gaze directly. "My people will not allow strange women in camp. Too dangerous in war times." Sarah's mouth went dry as his meaning became clear. "Are you saying I can only stay if I'm married to someone?" "To me," he confirmed. "But not true marriage," he hastened to add, seeing her expression. "Just words for others. For protection only." A pretend marriage? Sarah's mind raced. The concept was shocking, improper by every standard of her upbringing. "Until waters go down," Taze assured her. "Until safe path to white towns." "And if I refuse?" His expression remained steady, though something like regret flickered in his eyes. "Then I take you back down mountain. Find dry place with food, water. Return when I can." The prospect of being left alone in the wilderness, injured and with William's men searching the region, sent a chill through Sarah's already cold body. Yet to enter into even a pretend marriage with a man she barely knew, a man from a culture so different from her own. "What would be expected of me?" she asked carefully. "Nothing of." He hesitated, then made a vague gesture that nonetheless conveyed his meaning clearly enough. "No sharing of blankets, only words for others to hear. You sleep in my family wiki-up, but separate place. And your family will accept this arrangement? My parents walk with ancestors. My grandmother and sister remain. They will understand." A shadow crossed his face. "My wife and son died for winters past. No one expects me to take true wife yet." The mention of his loss softened something in Sarah. This man had his own griefs, his own story. And now he offered her protection at potential cost to his standing in his community. "What would I need to do?" she asked. Relief visibly washed over him. "Simple ceremony. Few words. You wear this." He removed a necklace of polished stones and carved bone from around his neck. "Shows you under my protection." Sarah studied the necklace. A beautiful piece, clearly of personal significance. "Is this important to you?" "Was my father's. Shows I am son of Kianata, respected warrior." He offered it to her. "Now shows you are wife of Taze, son of Kianata." The weight of the gesture wasn't lost on Sarah. She inclined her head, allowing him to place the necklace around her neck. The smooth stones felt warm against her skin. "What do I say during this ceremony?" "Only repeat words. Simple promise to be loyal, to honor Apache ways while with us." He looked at her intently. "When safe to leave, promise ends. You free again." Sarah touched the necklace, considering what she was agreeing to. Not so different, perhaps, from the social contracts of her own world, except this one offered protection rather than possession. "I'll do it," she said finally. "And I'll honor my word while I'm here." Taze nodded, satisfaction and something else, relief perhaps, evident in his expression. "Come then, wife who is not wife. My people wait." As they approached the camp, Sarah squared her shoulders despite her exhaustion. She had faced down disapproving school boards and William Blackwood's unwanted advances. She could certainly manage this latest challenge in what had become a most unexpected journey. Besides, a pretend marriage to an Apache warrior still seemed preferable to a real one with William Blackwood. The women watched Sarah with undisguised suspicion. 3 days in the Apache camp, had done little to soften their wary glances or muted conversations that fell silent when she approached. She couldn't blame them. To their eyes, she was the enemy, a white woman suddenly in their midst, married to one of their most respected men. The marriage ceremony had been brief but solemn. Taze's grandmother, a tiny woman with deep-set eyes and skin like weathered leather, had conducted the ritual. Sarah had repeated unfamiliar words, placed her hands in Taze's, and accepted a blanket wrapped around them both as symbols were drawn in cornmeal at their feet. Whatever doubts the tribe harbored about the union, they had respected the ceremony itself. Now Sarah sat cross-legged outside Taze's family wickiup, struggling with a clay water jug. The other women formed a circle nearby, effortlessly coiling thin ropes of clay to functional vessels while conversing in their native tongue. "Too wet," a voice said beside her. Sarah looked up to find Taze's grandmother, Nazcha, studying her misshapen attempt. The old woman's English was surprisingly good, though heavily accented. "Clay must be firm, not soft." Sarah nodded gratefully. "I've never made pottery before." Nazca's eyes crinkled. "This I see." She lowered herself beside Sarah with remarkable agility for her age. Taking the ruined jug, she deftly reformed the clay, her gnarled fingers moving with practiced precision. Like this. For the next hour, Sarah followed Nazca's patient instruction. By midday, she had produced a crude but functional water jug, her first useful contribution to camp life. The accomplishment, small as it was, gave her a disproportionate sense of satisfaction. "Good," Nazcha pronounced. "Tomorrow basket making." Their exchange drew curious glances from the other women. One, younger than the rest and visibly pregnant, approached hesitantly. Nazcha spoke to her in Apache, gesturing toward Sarah. "My granddaughter Luyu," Nazcha explained, "Taze's sister. She asks if you know plants for women's pain. Her time comes soon." Sarah thought of the herbal remedies her mother had taught her. "I know some. Raspberry leaf tea helps with women's monthly discomforts and childbirth." Nazcha translated. Luyu's expression brightened slightly. "She asks if you find such plants here." Sarah rose carefully, mindful of her still healing injuries. "I can look. The varieties may differ from what I know, but the families should be similar." By sunset, Sarah had identified several useful herbs growing near the camp's perimeter. Under Nazca's watchful eye, she prepared a tea for Luyu, who accepted it with cautious gratitude. It was a small bridge across the chasm of distrust, but a beginning nonetheless. That evening, Taze returned from hunting with 2 rabbits. As Sarah helped prepare the meal, another skill she was slowly acquiring, he watched her interaction with his family with evident satisfaction. "You learn fast," he observed as they ate. "Your grandmother is a patient teacher." Sarah glanced toward Nazcha, who was showing Luyu how to incorporate Sarah's herbs into a traditional remedy. "Though I think she believes I'm hopelessly ignorant." "Not ignorant. Different knowing." Taze searched for words. "Book knowing, not hand knowing." Sarah smiled at his perceptiveness. "Yes, exactly. I've spent my life with books, not practical skills. You teach me book words, I teach you hand skills," he proposed. "Fair trade." Later, as the camp settled for the night, Taze kept his promise. By firelight, Sarah used a stick to draw letters in the dirt, teaching him the English alphabet. His quick mind absorbed the information readily, connecting sounds to symbols with remarkable speed. In turn, he taught her basic Apache phrases, greetings, thanks, simple requests. Sarah struggled with the unfamiliar sounds, but Taze's encouragement kept her trying. "Why do you want to learn to read?" she asked during a pause. His expression grew serious. "Government men bring papers. Say one thing, paper says different thing. If I read, they cannot trick Apache people." Sarah thought of the countless broken treaties and dishonest dealings she'd read about. "That's very wise. Not wisdom, survival." He drew a simple word in the dirt with his finger. "What says?" "Water," Sarah replied. "You've written water." Taze nodded, satisfied. "Tomorrow, more words. Now sleep." As Sarah settled onto her separate sleeping mat in the family wickiup, she reflected on the day's small victories. A clay water jug, herbal knowledge shared, letters drawn in dirt, tiny bridges spanning vast cultural divides. And somewhere beneath it all, a growing sense that perhaps she had found, however temporarily, a place where she might belong. The river swallowed her again. Sarah thrashed against the current, lungs burning, the weight of her sodden dress dragging her down into darkness. But this time, instead of Taze's steady hands pulling her to safety, William Blackwood's face loomed beneath the water's surface, his fingers closing around her throat. "You belong to me," his voice bubbled through the murky depths. "I always collect what's mine." Sarah jolted awake with a strangled cry, her heart hammering against her ribs. Disoriented, she clutched at her throat, still feeling phantom fingers tightening there. The wickiup was dark save for the faint glow of dying embers. Nazcha and Luyu slept soundly on the opposite side, undisturbed by her nightmare. A shadow moved near the entrance, Taze, returning from night watch. He crouched beside her sleeping mat, concern evident even in the dim light. "Bad dreams?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, unable to find her voice immediately. Taze reached for a water skin, offering it to her. The cool liquid helped restore her equilibrium. "The river again," she finally managed. "And William." Taze's expression hardened at the name. Over the past week, through halting conversations, Sarah had shared portions of her story. Her unjust dismissal, William's unwanted pursuit, her desperate flight. Taze had listened without judgment, asking few questions but absorbing every detail. "He cannot reach you here," Taze assured her. "It's foolish, I know." Sarah drew her blanket closer around her shoulders. "Even if the waters recede, he'd never find this place." Taze was silent for a moment. "Fear has wisdom sometimes, keeps us alert." The simple observation struck Sarah as profoundly true. Her fear, however irrational in the safety of the camp, served a purpose, reminding her to remain vigilant, to appreciate her temporary sanctuary. "Did you have nightmares? After your wife and son?" She trailed off, immediately regretting the intrusion. To her surprise, Taze nodded. "Many moons of bad dreams. Sickness took them quick. 3 days only." His voice remained steady, but pain shadowed his features. "I hunted for medicine plants. When I returned, too late." "I'm so sorry." The inadequacy of the words hung in the night air. "White doctor at fort had medicine. Would not give to Apache." His tone held no bitterness, only a deep sadness. "My son had 2 summers. My wife, Keisha, 20 winters." Sarah thought of the reservation system, the systematic neglect of native peoples she'd read about in newspaper accounts, sanitized versions that never captured the human cost reflected in Taze's quiet grief. "That's why you helped me, isn't it? Despite everything your people have suffered at the hands of mine. All life has worth." Taze repeated his words from their first conversation. "Cannot change what happened. Can choose what I do now." The simplicity of his philosophy humbled her. How many sermons had she sat through that preached Christian charity while ignoring the suffering of people like Taze's? "Family?" A cool breeze swept through the wickiup. Sarah shivered, her nightmare still too close for comfort. Wordlessly, Taze reached for something beside him. A beautifully crafted blanket adorned with stars and geometric patterns. "Star blanket," he explained, draping it around her shoulders. "My mother made. Stars guide spirits home." The blanket carried his scent. Pine, smoke, and something indefinably comforting. Sarah pulled it closer, grateful for both the warmth and the gesture. "Thank you. Not just for the blanket, for everything." Taze settled beside her, maintaining a respectful distance while keeping company with her fear. "Stars good for bad dreams," he said, gesturing toward the wickiup entrance. "Want to see?" Sarah nodded. Together they moved outside, sitting side by side on a flat rock overlooking the sleeping camp. The night sky blazed with stars, more than Sarah had ever seen in Prescott, where coal smoke and lamp light dimmed the heavens. So many, she whispered. Apache believe stars are ancestors watching, Taze said. Never alone under stars. The vastness above should have made Sarah feel small, insignificant. Instead, seated beside this man who had saved her life and now guarded her sleep, she felt strangely connected. To the night, to the earth beneath them, to something larger than herself. When Taze's hand came to rest beside hers on the stone, not quite touching but close enough to share warmth, Sarah didn't pull away. The nightmare receded, replaced by the quiet companionship of two people from different worlds, finding unexpected common ground beneath an ancient sky. Hold steady. Breathe first, then release. Sarah focused on the small target Taze had fashioned from pine bark and set against a distant tree. Her arms trembled slightly from holding the bow drawn. The weapon was smaller than the ones the men used, crafted specifically for her by Taze over several evenings. Remember, arrow goes where eyes look, he coached from beside her. Sarah exhaled slowly and released the string. The arrow flew straight, missing the target but embedding itself in the tree trunk. Her closest attempt yet after a morning of practice. Better, Taze nodded approvingly. Again. 2 weeks in the Apache camp had transformed Sarah in ways she was only beginning to recognize. Her hands, once soft from schoolroom work, now bore calluses from daily tasks. Her skin had darkened under the mountain sun, and her muscles had strengthened from constant activity. Most surprisingly, she had developed a tentative proficiency with the bow, a skill she would have considered unthinkable in her previous life. Why is this so important? She asked as she nocked another arrow. I doubt I'll be joining the hunting parties. Not for hunting, Taze replied. For protection. Woman should defend herself. The arrow flew, this time grazing the edge of the target. Sarah lowered the bow, considering his words. No man in Prescott would have suggested she learn self-defense. Women were to be protected or controlled, never empowered. Your turn to teach, Taze said, leading her back toward the camp. Under a shady pine, they settled for their daily reading lesson. From the salvaged page of her teaching journal and scraps of paper Taze had collected on trading journeys, Sarah had assembled a crude primer. Taze's progress with English reading had been remarkable, his natural intelligence and determination making up for the limited materials. Cat, he read from the page. Dog. Horse. Excellent, Sarah smiled. Now try this sentence. She had written a simple phrase using a charcoal stick. The man rides the horse to town. Taze studied it, sounding out each word deliberately. His finger traced beneath the text as she had taught him. The man rides the horse to town. Pride warmed Sarah's chest. Perfect. Write more, he requested, handing her the charcoal. Sarah hesitated, then wrote, Taze teaches Sarah to shoot the bow. He read it slowly, then looked up with a rare smile. True words. The simple exchange filled Sarah with a sense of purpose she had missed since losing her teaching position. Here, far from conventional classrooms, she was still a teacher, and simultaneously a student. I found these yesterday, she said, reaching into a small pouch at her waist. She produced several plants with distinctive leaves. I think they're similar to what my mother called yarrow, good for stopping bleeding and treating wounds. Taze examined the plants with interest. Apache call this warrior medicine. Same use. He pointed to the feathery leaves. Crush with fat, put on cuts. In Massachusetts, my mother mixed it with witch hazel. Here we mix with pine sap. He demonstrated how to roll the leaves between his fingers, releasing their pungent aroma. Good finding. You have eye for plants now. The compliment pleased her more than it should have. Over the days, their exchanges had developed a comfortable rhythm, each sharing knowledge from their respective worlds, building a bridge of mutual respect between them. That evening, Sarah joined the women preparing the evening meal. Her initial clumsiness had given way to growing competence, and while some still regarded her with suspicion, others had begun to accept her presence. Luyu, in particular, had warmed to her since Sarah's herbal remedies had eased her pregnancy discomforts. Across the camp, Taze sat with several men, examining a hunting bow. Though she couldn't hear their conversation, she noticed how they deferred to his opinion, respecting his expertise. Nazcha settled beside Sarah, her keen eyes missing nothing. "You watch my grandson closely." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He's been kind to me." "Kindness only?" The old woman's expression remained neutral, but her tone suggested she perceived more. "He's teaching me to survive," Sarah replied carefully. Nazcha nodded. "And you teach him white man's words. Good trade." She sprinkled herbs into the cooking pot. "But I see more than trade when you look at each other." "Our arrangement is temporary," Sarah reminded her, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "When the waters recede." "Water's already going down," Nazcha interrupted. "Soon paths will open." The simple observation struck Sarah with unexpected force. She had been so absorbed in daily camp life that she'd almost forgotten her situation's temporary nature. "Yes," she agreed, suddenly subdued. "Soon the paths will open." But as she watched Taze demonstrate a hunting technique to the younger men, Sarah realized that the prospect of leaving no longer filled her with the relief she might have expected. The council fire burned bright against the gathering dusk, illuminating the faces of the assembled tribal leaders. Sarah sat slightly behind Taze, conscious of the many eyes that assessed her with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Though she had been in the camp for nearly 3 weeks, this was her first time attending a formal council meeting. Ketchum, a warrior in his 50s with a face mapped by deep lines and a reputation as a fierce fighter against white encroachment, spoke with controlled intensity in Apache. Though Sarah couldn't understand his words, his gestures toward the valley below and then toward her made his topic clear enough. Taze listened respectfully before responding, his voice calm but firm. The exchange continued for several minutes, other elders occasionally adding their perspectives to what was clearly becoming a heated debate. Nazcha leaned close to Sarah. "Riders seen in valley. White men asking questions at trading post below mountains." Sarah's breath caught. "William, Ketchum says you bring danger to camp," Nazcha continued bluntly. "Says white woman must go when next sun rises." The prospect of being forced to leave sent a chill through Sarah that had nothing to do with the mountain evening. In the weeks since her rescue, the camp had become a sanctuary, not just from William, but from the constraints and prejudices of her former life. Taze stood now, speaking with quiet authority. He gestured to several women in the circle, including Luyu, who nodded in apparent agreement with whatever he was saying. "What's happening?" Sarah whispered. "He speaks of your help with healing plants, of teaching our children to understand white man's words." Nazca's weathered face remained impassive. "Says you are wife under his protection." The council leader, an elderly man named Nilchi whose opinion carried the greatest weight, raised his hand for silence. He addressed Taze directly, then turned his gaze to Sarah. "He asks if white woman wishes to speak." Nazcha translated. Sarah hesitated. As a teacher, she was accustomed to addressing rooms full of students and occasionally their parents, but this was entirely different. Still, she understood that her future, perhaps her very survival, might depend on what she said next. She rose, conscious of her odd appearance. A white woman in adapted Apache clothing, her hair braided in the tribal style Luyu had shown her. When she spoke, she directed her words to Nilchi, pausing after each sentence to allow Taze to translate. "I understand your concerns about my presence here. I am grateful for the shelter and kindness your people have shown me, especially Taze, who saved my life at the river." The elders listened impassively as Taze conveyed her words. "The man searching for me is dangerous, not just to me but to anyone who helps me. I would never knowingly bring harm to those who have protected me." Sarah glanced at Taze, drawing strength from his steady presence. "If the council decides I must leave, I will do so without argument. But if permitted to stay until the valley is truly safe, I will continue to contribute however I can, with medicinal knowledge, teaching, and any work needed." After Taze translated, the council members exchanged glances. Ketchum spoke again, his tone challenging. Nazcha whispered the meaning. He asks what happens when waters fully recede. Will you return to your people and bring soldiers to our location? The accusation stung, but Sarah understood its roots in generations of betrayal. She met Ketchum's gaze directly. I have no people to return to. The white community rejected me. I would die before revealing this camp's location to anyone who might bring harm here. When Taze translated this, his voice carried an unexpected intensity that caused several council members to look between him and Sarah with new interest. Nilchi spoke at length, the other elders nodding as he delivered what appeared to be his decision. When he finished, the tension in the circle noticeably eased. He says you may stay through winter, Nascha informed her. Too dangerous now with white men searching. By spring thaw, council will decide again. Relief washed over Sarah. Winter meant months of sanctuary, time to strengthen her skills and her position within the tribe. As the council dispersed, Taze approached her, his expression revealing more emotion than she typically saw from him. You spoke well. I spoke truthfully, Sarah replied. Thank you for defending me. Something shifted in his gaze. Not just duty. I want you to stay. The simple declaration hung between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to address. Sarah found herself unable to look away from him, aware of a growing certainty that her future had somehow become inextricably linked with his. I want to stay too, she admitted, the truth of it surprising even her. Around them, the council fire burned low, casting long shadows across the mountain camp that had, against all expectation, become her home. The first snow came in early November, transforming the mountain camp overnight. Sarah woke to a world blanketed in white, the familiar landscape rendered new and magical. By December, winter had settled in earnest, bringing bitter cold that drove the tribe into closer quarters and more intimate daily routines. With Nazca's blessing, Sarah and Taze now occupied a small winter lodge of their own, a practical necessity as the elder's health required the warmth of sleeping near the central fire with Luyu, who had given birth to a healthy son in late November. Though their marriage remained in name only, the private dwelling inevitably drew them into a domestic partnership neither had anticipated. Snow comes again, Taze observed one morning, securing the lodge's entrance against the biting wind. 3 days, maybe 4. Sarah nodded, adding fuel to their small fire. She had learned to read weather signs nearly as well as the Apache, her body attuning to the rhythms of mountain life with surprising ease. We have enough firewood? Yes, and meat. He gestured to the deer haunches hanging from the lodge poles, preserved by the cold. You have enough medicine plants? Plenty. Sarah had spent the fall meticulously drying herbs under Nazca's guidance, preparing for winter illnesses. They moved around each other with the comfortable familiarity of people who had shared space for months, each anticipating the other's needs and movements. When Taze brought in more firewood, Sarah automatically shifted to make room. When she prepared tea, she handed him the first cup without asking. As the predicted storm descended, they settled into what had become their evening ritual. By firelight, Sarah read aloud from a dog-eared copy of Emerson's essays that Taze had obtained from a trader passing through before the heavy snows. Though the philosophical concepts were complex, Taze listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed his keen intelligence. The eye is the first circle, the horizon which it forms is the second, Sarah read. And throughout nature this primary figure is repeated without end. Taze considered this, like ripples in water when stone drops. Exactly, Sarah smiled, continually impressed by his insights. Emerson is saying that everything in nature follows patterns that repeat themselves. Apache believed this too, all life connected in circle. He demonstrated by drawing a circle in the dirt floor. No beginning, no end. Always returning. In turn, Taze shared Apache stories, creation myths, trickster tales, histories of his people's migrations. Sarah absorbed these narratives eagerly, recognizing their importance not just as entertainment but as cultural knowledge rarely shared with outsiders. My father would tell this story during winter storms, Taze explained after recounting how Coyote stole fire for the people. Said wind is Coyote still running from those who want fire back. My father read Shakespeare during storms, Sarah offered. Said thunder was like the great battles in his plays. These exchanges of childhood memories had become precious to them both. Small glimpses into the experiences that had shaped them, building understanding across their different backgrounds. As the evening deepened and the storm howled outside, Sarah worked on mending one of Taze's shirts, her fingers now skilled with the bone needle. Across the fire, he crafted new arrows, his hands moving with practiced precision. Your stitches good now, he observed. First ones made Nazcha laugh. Sarah chuckled, remembering her early, clumsy attempts. She called them drunken ant tracks. Now straight as arrow flight. Their eyes met briefly across the fire, both recognizing the unspoken truth. Sarah was no longer merely surviving among the Apache. She was thriving, becoming an integrated part of their world. When Taze reached for more sinew to bind his arrowheads, his hand accidentally brushed hers. In the earlier days of their arrangement, both would have withdrawn quickly, maintaining careful boundaries. Now neither pulled away immediately. The brief contact lingered, acknowledgement of something evolving between them. Later, as they prepared for sleep on their separate pallets on opposite sides of the fire, Taze spoke into the comfortable silence. Spring comes soon to mountains. The simple observation carried weighty implications. Spring meant open trails. The council's decision about her future. The possibility of departure. Yes, Sarah replied, watching firelight play across his features. But winter isn't over yet. Taze's eyes met hers, understanding the layers in her response. No, not yet. As the storm wrapped their lodge in a cocoon of snow and wind, Sarah pulled her blanket closer, aware that somewhere during these shared winter months, her pretend marriage had developed roots neither of them had planned for, roots that would make any spring separation far more painful than she had ever anticipated. February brought the first hints of thaw. Icicles weeping from lodge poles, patches of earth emerging through thinning snow. With the milder weather came news that set the camp astir. More horses had been stolen from a neighboring Apache band, almost certainly by the same thieves Taze had been tracking when he found Sarah. The council fire burned late into the night as the men discussed strategy. Though Sarah was not invited to these deliberations, she could sense their gravity from Taze's preoccupied silence when he returned to their lodge. You're leaving, aren't you? She asked as he stared into their fire, his expression distant. He nodded once. For days. With 7 others. Horses taken from Mescalero cousins to south. Many animals needed for spring hunting. Sarah's stomach tightened with an anxiety that surprised her in its intensity. Over the winter months, she had grown accustomed to Taze's steady presence, his quiet strength a constant in her new life. The prospect of his absence, and the dangers it entailed, stirred fears she hadn't anticipated. How long will you be gone? Not known. He finally met her gaze. Thieves headed toward white settlements. More dangerous to follow there. The implication was clear. Pursuing horse thieves near white towns carried risks beyond the normal dangers of such missions. Apache men near settlements were often shot on sight, regardless of their purpose. Can't someone else go? You've already missed the initial tracking because... She trailed off, the guilt sudden and sharp. Because he had been occupied with her. I must go. His tone was gentle but firm. These thieves, I tracked before finding you. My duty to finish. Sarah nodded, understanding duty all too well. Hadn't she crossed a continent out of duty to her parents' memory, determined to use her education as they had sacrificed to provide? I'll worry, she admitted, the honesty of it surprising them both. Something softened in Taze's expression. You safe here. Ketchum stays with warriors to protect camp. I'm not worried about me. The words emerged before she could consider their implication. A moment of silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings neither had fully acknowledged. Since the winter solstice, their careful physical boundaries had begun to blur, hands lingering during daily tasks, sitting closer by the evening fire, eyes meeting with increasing frequency. Yet neither had taken the decisive step to transform their arrangement from practical to personal. What can I do? Sarah finally asked. To help prepare, I mean. Taze seemed to welcome the shift to practicalities. Medicine for journey. Food that travels without cooking. Eyes watching young ones while mothers work. Over the next 3 days, Sarah threw herself into preparations. She packed dried meat and pine nuts into small parfleche containers, prepared healing salves for wounds and herbs for fever, and spent hours with the children so other women could sew moccasins and repair equipment. On the eve of departure, Taze returned to their lodge with something wrapped in soft hide. "For you," he said, offering the bundle. Sarah unwrapped it to find a hunting bow. Smaller than a warrior's weapon but larger and more powerful than the practice bow she had been using. "Your skill grows," he explained. "Should have proper bow now." She ran her fingers over the smooth wood, recognizing the craftsmanship that had gone into its creation. This was no hastily made tool, but an item of significance. "Did you make this?" He nodded. "Started at first snow. Finished when you shot straight 10 times. The realization that he had been crafting this gift for months touched Sarah deeply. "It's beautiful. Thank you. Practice while I am gone," he instructed. 10 arrows each day. "I will." She hesitated, then added, "Taze, when you return." He waited, his dark eyes intent on her face. "When you return, we should talk about what happens when spring truly arrives. About our arrangement." Understanding flickered in his expression. "Yes, when I return." That night, as they prepared for sleep one last time before his departure, Sarah made a decision. Instead of moving to her usual sleeping place across the fire, she laid her blankets beside his. Not touching, but close enough that he would understand her meaning. Taze paused, visibly surprised, then slowly settled beside her. In the dim firelight, his hand found hers, fingers intertwining. No words were needed. The gesture spoke volumes, acknowledging what had been growing between them through the winter months, offering a promise of conversations to come when he returned. As Sarah drifted towards sleep, still holding Taze's hand, she realized with perfect clarity that somewhere during these months, the pretend wife had developed very real feelings for her warrior husband. 4 days after Taze's departure, Sarah was grinding medicinal bark with Nazcha when the camp's atmosphere abruptly shifted. Children playing near the perimeter suddenly fell silent. Women exchanged swift glances, gathering little ones close. Warriors appeared from various lodges, weapons in hand. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, setting aside her work. Nazca's weathered face tightened. "Riders coming. Not Apache." A young boy raced into the camp center, breathlessly reporting to Ketchum in rapid Apache. The older warrior issued quiet commands, positioning men strategically throughout the camp. "How many?" Sarah asked Luyu, who stood nearby with her infant son clutched to her chest. 5 men. "White men," Luyu replied, her limited English strained with tension. "One wears star. A marshal." The realization sent ice through Sarah's veins. Only one white man would bring law enforcement to an Apache camp in search of her. William had found her. Sarah retreated to her lodge, heart hammering against her ribs. Taze's bow hung on the wall beside a quiver of arrows. She took them down with trembling hands, then steeled herself. She would not be taken without resistance. When she emerged, the riders were already dismounting at the camp's edge. 4 rough-looking men and 1 immaculately dressed figure she would recognize anywhere. William Blackwood, Jr., his tailored coat incongruous against the wilderness setting, surveyed the camp with cold disdain. Beside him stood a jowly man with a tarnished badge pinned to his vest. Marshal Davis, known throughout the territory for his willingness to enforce any law that wealthy men like the Blackwoods desired. "I'm looking for a fugitive," William announced without preamble, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent camp. "A woman, Sarah Holloway." Ketchum stepped forward, his expression impassive. "No white woman here. Don't lie to me, savage." William's face flushed with anger. "We tracked her to the river. Found pieces of her dress downstream. The trading post owner said an Apache brave brought supplies for a white woman 3 weeks ago." Sarah remained partially concealed behind a lodge, assessing the situation. William's men were heavily armed, but the Apache warriors outnumbered them. Still, any violence would only bring military retaliation against the tribe. "Search the camp," William ordered his men. Marshal Davis finally spoke, his tone suggesting boredom with the entire affair. "Now hold on, Blackwood. We're on Indian land. Need to respect certain proprieties." "I've paid you to find my property, Davis," William snapped. "This woman is legally bound to me through a contractual engagement. She stole my horse and fled before our wedding." "No contract with woman who says no," Ketchum replied, his limited English carrying unmistakable dignity. "Apache know this. White man should learn." William's hand moved to his silver-handled pistol. "I've had enough insolence from you people. Either produce Sarah Holloway or—" "I'm here, William." Sarah stepped into view, bow held loosely at her side but not raised. She would not provoke violence against the people who had protected her. William's expression shifted from rage to smug satisfaction. "Sarah, my dear, you've led us on quite a chase." His eyes narrowed as he took in her Apache clothing and braided hair. "Though clearly you've forgotten your proper place in society." "My place is here," Sarah replied steadily. "I'm married according to Apache law." William's laugh was ugly. "Married? To some savage? How convenient." He turned to Davis. "Marshal, I believe the law is clear regarding white women living among Indians." Davis nodded, patting the pistol at his hip. "Frontier morality statute is pretty specific. White women found living in Indian camps are presumed to be held against their will." "I am not being held against my will," Sarah stated firmly. "I chose to stay here after being rescued from drowning." "Rescued by your husband, I presume?" William's voice dripped with sarcasm. "And where is this noble brave now?" "Away," Sarah answered, unwilling to provide details of Taze's mission. "How fortuitous." William stepped toward her. "Pack whatever belongings you value, Sarah. We're leaving immediately. The wedding will proceed as planned upon our return to Prescott." "I'm not going anywhere with you." William's facade of civility cracked. "You have no choice. Either you come willingly, or the marshal arrests you for horse theft and these savages for kidnapping." The women of the tribe moved closer to Sarah, forming a protective circle. Nazcha stepped forward, her small frame radiating defiance. "She is daughter of tribe now, wife of Taze. You know, take her." William's hand closed around his pistol. "I've had enough of this farce." "You will wait," Sarah commanded with unexpected authority. "I am Taze's wife. He returns soon. This matter will be settled then." Something in her tone gave William pause. He studied her face, perhaps seeing for the first time the changes months among the Apache had wrought. Not just in her appearance, but in her confidence and resolve. "Fine," he finally said. "We'll make camp nearby and wait for this husband to return. But understand this, Sarah, you will be leaving with me one way or another." As William and his men withdrew to establish their camp within view of the Apache settlement, Sarah turned to Ketchum. "We must send warning to Taze." The warrior nodded grimly. "Already done." Young runner left when dust from horses first seen. Sarah clutched Taze's bow tighter, praying the message would reach him in time. 2 days of tense waiting had stretched Sarah's nerves to the breaking point. William and his men maintained their camp within sight of the Apache settlement, their presence a constant threat. Twice daily, William approached to demand Sarah's surrender, each time leaving with thinly veiled threats when Ketchum and the other warriors stood firm. Sarah had barely slept, dividing her time between helping maintain the camp's normal routines and watching the trail for any sign of Taze's return. The women had kept her constantly surrounded, never leaving her alone where William's men might attempt to seize her. On the morning of the 3rd day, the sentry's call rang out, riders approaching from the east. Sarah's heart leapt to her throat as she hurried to the camp's edge. Through the early mist, she could make out a line of mounted figures driving what appeared to be a substantial herd of horses. "Taze," she whispered, relief washing through her. The returning party entered the camp amid celebratory calls from the tribe. Their mission had clearly been successful. More than 20 horses moved in a controlled group behind the mounted warriors. Taze rode at the lead, his expression shifting from triumph to wariness as he noted the unusual atmosphere in the camp. His eyes found Sarah immediately. The subtle softening of his features when he saw her unharmed spoke volumes, despite the public setting. "White men camp there," Ketchum informed him, gesturing toward William's position. "Come for your wife." Taze dismounted in a fluid motion, handing his reins to another warrior. "The runner found us yesterday. We rode through the night." His voice betrayed no fatigue as he turned to Sarah. "You are well?" "Yes," she assured him, fighting the urge to throw herself into his arms. "But William brought a marshal. He claims I'm his property, that our engagement was a legal contract." "No man owns another," Taze stated with quiet certainty. He looked to Ketchum. "They threatened force?" "Words only so far," the older warrior replied. "But their eyes speak of violence." Taze nodded grimly. "I will speak with them." "I'm coming with you," Sarah insisted, retrieving the bow he had made her. After a moment's consideration, Taze nodded. Together, they walked toward the neutral ground between the two camps, Ketchum and two other warriors following at a respectful distance. William and his men emerged from their camp when they saw the approaching group. The mine owner's son had abandoned his formerly immaculate appearance, his beard now several days grown, his fine coat dusty from the trail. "So this is the husband," William called, his voice carrying a sneer. "You've had your adventure playing squaw, Sarah. It's time to return to civilization." Taze's expression remained impassive, though Sarah could sense the tension in his stance. "I am Taze, son of Kianada of the White Mountain Apache. Sarah is my wife by tribal law." Marshal Davis stepped forward, thumbs hooked in his belt near his pistol. "Tribal law don't mean squat when it comes to white women, Chief. I've got papers here." He patted a leather pouch at his side. Engagement contract signed by the lady's former employer as her guardian, naming Mr. Blackwood as her intended. "I never signed any such document," Sarah objected. "And Headmistress Abernathy had no legal right to act as my guardian. I'm 26 years old." "Doesn't matter," Davis shrugged. "Territory law says white women living among Indians are presumed captives. I'm authorized to take you into protective custody." "She is not captive," Taze stated firmly. "She stays by choice. As my wife." William's face flushed with anger. "This charade has gone on long enough." He turned to Sarah. "You've made your point, whatever it was. I'm willing to overlook this indiscretion if you come now without further drama." "There's nothing to overlook, William," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I was never yours. I never agreed to marry you. What exists between Taze and me is more real than anything you offered." William's hand moved to his silver-handled pistol. "I won't be humiliated by a schoolteacher and a savage. Remove your hand from your weapon," Taze commanded, his tone leaving no room for misinterpretation. "This is Apache land. You are visitors here, not welcomed ones." For a tense moment, the two men locked eyes across the clearing. William, the embodiment of entitled arrogance. Taze, the personification of quiet dignity. The contrast between them had never been clearer to Sarah. "This isn't over," William finally said, his hand dropping from his weapon. "We're making camp right here. When the military patrol comes through next week, we'll see what they have to say about a white woman being held in an Apache camp." "I am not being held," Sarah stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Taze. "I choose to stay with my husband." The declaration, spoken without hesitation and with clear intent, seemed to hit William like a physical blow. His confidence faltered visibly as he recognized the truth. Sarah had changed. The proper schoolteacher he had thought to possess had been replaced by a woman who stood her ground with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her own mind. "Dawn tomorrow," William said finally, his voice cold. "One last chance to come to your senses, Sarah. After that, I can't be responsible for what happens." As they returned to the Apache camp, Taze's hand found Sarah's, their fingers intertwining in full view of both sides. "He will not leave peacefully," Taze observed quietly. "No," Sarah agreed. "He won't." Sarah woke before dawn, though she had barely slept. Beside her, Taze was already awake, methodically checking his weapons in the dim firelight. "They will come with first light," he said without preamble. Sarah nodded, reaching for the bow he had made her. "I know." Throughout the night, the camp had prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Women and children were hidden in a cave higher up the mountain with provisions for several days. Warriors had positioned themselves strategically, utilizing their knowledge of the terrain for maximum advantage. "You should go with the others," Taze suggested, though his tone indicated he already knew her answer. "No." Sarah tightened the rawhide strings on her borrowed moccasins. "This fight exists because of me. I won't hide while others face the danger." Taze studied her face in the flickering light, then nodded once. "Stay close to me. Use the bow only if necessary." They emerged from their lodge to find the camp transformed into a defensive position. Ketchum approached, his weathered face solemn. "Scouts report movement in their camp. They prepare weapons." Taze issued quiet commands, positioning the remaining warriors. To Sarah, he assigned a place behind a large boulder with a clear view of the main approach. "Watch the path. Signal if you see them flanking." As the first pale light crept above the eastern horizon, Sarah recalled a morning much like this one at Prescott Ladies Academy. She had been teaching her students about the Revolutionary War, explaining the concept of an ambush to wide-eyed young women who would never face any danger more pressing than a difficult dancing partner. How far she had come from that sheltered classroom. Here she crouched, bow in hand, prepared to defend not just herself but the people who had become her family. The attack came with the suddenness of a lightning strike. William's men charged up the path on horseback, firing wildly into the camp. Their strategy, if it could be called such, seemed to rely on shock and superior firepower rather than tactical advantage. The Apache response was disciplined and precise. Warriors emerged from concealed positions, firing arrows and the few rifles the tribe possessed. 2 of William's men fell immediately, their horses bolting in panic. From her position, Sarah spotted Marshal Davis attempting to circle behind the main defense. She put 2 fingers to her lips and whistled shrilly, the signal Taze had taught her. Instantly, 2 warriors redirected their attention, cutting off the marshal's advance. William himself remained at the rear initially, shouting orders and firing his pistol ineffectively at distant targets. But as his forces were systematically outmaneuvered, his composure cracked. With a roar of frustration, he spurred his horse directly toward the center of the camp, toward the lodge Sarah shared with Taze. "He's coming for our home," she realized aloud, knocking an arrow to her bow. William dismounted near the lodge, kicking aside the cooking implements outside. "Sarah," he bellowed, "I know you're here. This ends now." Sarah emerged from her cover, bow drawn and aimed at her former fiancé. "It's over, William. Leave while you still can." He spun toward her voice, his silver-handled pistol glinting in the early sunlight. "There you are, my dear." His once handsome face was contorted with rage and something worse, wounded pride. "Look what these savages have done to you, dressed like a squaw, pointing weapons at your betters. These people have shown me more respect in months than you did in all the time I knew you," Sarah replied, maintaining her aim. "Leave our camp. Now." "Our camp?" William laughed bitterly. "You've truly gone native, haven't you? Well, if I can't have you, no one will." He raised his pistol. Sarah's fingers tensed on the bowstring, but before she could release, a blur of movement caught her peripheral vision. Taze charged toward them, having spotted William's advance toward their lodge. William pivoted, aiming at the approaching warrior with deadly intent. "Time to end your marriage, savage." Without conscious thought, Sarah loosed her arrow. It struck William's shoulder, not a killing shot, but enough to spoil his aim. His pistol discharged harmlessly into the ground as he stumbled backward, howling in pain and outrage. Taze reached him in seconds, disarming him with practiced efficiency. William struggled briefly before Taze subdued him, pressing him face down into the dirt. Around the camp, the brief, fierce battle was ending. Marshal Davis lay wounded but alive, his remaining man having surrendered. The skirmish had been decisively one-sided, Apache knowledge of terrain and superior tactics overwhelming the attacker's firearms advantage. Sarah approached William, her bow still held ready. Blood seeped through his expensive shirt where her arrow had struck him, a clean wound that would heal with proper treatment. "You shot me," he gasped, disbelief evident in his voice. "You actually shot me." "I did," Sarah acknowledged calmly, "and I would do it again to protect my husband and my home." William's eyes darted between her and Taze, comprehension finally dawning. "You really chose him, this life, over everything I offered you." "I chose freedom," Sarah corrected him. "Something you never understood." The sound of approaching riders interrupted the moment. Sarah tensed, fearing reinforcements, but Taze remained calm. "Not enemies," he assured her, still restraining William. "Apache from neighboring camp." They heard shots. As the new arrivals helped secure the prisoners, Sarah lowered her bow at last. The first rays of true sunlight broke over the mountain camp, illuminating the aftermath of a brief but decisive battle, and the woman who had found, against all expectation, both her courage and her home, the aftermath of violence carried its own peculiar silence. Sarah moved through the camp, helping tend to the wounded, both Apache and white. Her years of mixing herbal remedies under her mother's guidance, combined with the knowledge gained from Nascha, made her a capable healer despite her lack of formal medical training. William sat sullenly near the council fire, his shoulder bandaged with clean cloths and poultices to prevent infection. Sarah had removed her arrow with steady hands, his pained gasps stirring no sympathy within her. Nearby, Marshal Davis nursed a leg wound, while the sole surviving member of their party, a young man barely out of his teens, trembled visibly, clearly regretting his choice of employment. Taze approached as Sarah finished checking William's bandages. Riders coming. Many horses. A flicker of alarm passed through her until she saw his calm expression. "Friends." "Yes, cavalry patrol led by Lieutenant Carter. Good man who trades fair with Apache." Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. Official military presence meant the situation with William would be resolved according to territorial law, but what would that mean for her? Lieutenant Carter arrived with 6 soldiers, his demeanor professional but not overtly hostile toward the Apache. He took in the scene with practiced efficiency, the wounded men, the evidence of the morning's battle, Sarah in her Apache clothing tending to injuries. "Quite a situation you have here," he observed, dismounting. "Marshal Davis, I'm surprised to find you involved in this." "Whatever this is," Davis scowled. "Just doing my job, Lieutenant. Was hired to recover stolen property." "Property?" Carter's eyebrow rose as he glanced at Sarah. "He means me," Sarah stated flatly. "Mr. Blackwood claims I'm his fiancée and that I was kidnapped by the Apache." "And were you?" Carter asked directly. "No. I was rescued from drowning by Taze after fleeing an unwanted engagement. I've been living here by choice as his wife." William struggled to his feet, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "She's clearly been corrupted by living among savages, Lieutenant. Look at her, dressed like them, speaking their language. She needs to be returned to civilization." Carter studied Sarah thoughtfully. "Ma'am, I'm afraid there are indeed laws regarding white women living in Indian camps." "I'm aware of those laws," Sarah replied. "They're designed to recover captives, not to force free women to return to men they've rejected." She squared her shoulders. "I am a United States citizen with the right to choose where and how I live. I've broken no laws." "She stole my horse," William interjected. "A horse I returned to your stables 3 days after borrowing it," Sarah countered. "Your stable master can confirm this." Carter's mouth twitched slightly, suggesting he was not entirely unsympathetic to her position. "And what about this morning's altercation?" Ketchum stepped forward. "White men attacked Apache camp. We defended our people." They fired first, Sarah added, unprovoked, on a peaceful settlement containing women and children. Carter turned to William. Is this true, Mr. Blackwood? They were harboring my fiancée against her will. I see no evidence of that, Carter replied mildly. What I do see is a woman who appears quite capable of making her own decisions. He gestured for his men to help the wounded to their feet. Marshal Davis, Mr. Blackwood, I'll be escorting you back to Fort Apache. You'll receive proper medical care there, and we'll sort out this legal situation. He turned to Sarah. Ma'am, I'll need you to accompany us as well, to make a formal statement. Taze tensed beside her. Sarah placed a gentle hand on his arm. It's all right. I'll go and return. I go also, Taze stated firmly. Carter considered this, then nodded. Very well. Though I should warn you, the fort isn't always welcoming to Apache visitors. My wife will not travel alone with men who tried to take her by force, Taze replied simply. The lieutenant nodded, respecting the logic. We'll depart in an hour. As preparations were made for the journey, Nazcha approached Sarah with a bundle wrapped in soft hide. For you, the old woman said, pressing it into Sarah's hands. Sarah unwrapped it to find a wedding blanket of extraordinary craftsmanship, intricate patterns woven in rich earth tones with symbolic designs representing strength, fertility, and endurance. This is beautiful, Sarah whispered, recognizing the significance of such a gift. But we're already married. Nazca's weathered face creased in a rare smile. First marriage for safety, this for love. She patted Sarah's cheek with a gnarled hand. You fight for husband. Blood spilled in his defense. Now true Apache wife. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes as the elderly woman wrapped the blanket around both her and Taze, who had joined them. The gesture was more meaningful than any ceremony Sarah had witnessed in white society. A recognition not of legal status, but of the genuine bond that had formed between them. When this business at Fort is finished, Taze said quietly, we will have proper ceremony. All tribe will celebrate. Sarah leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. And after that? After that, he replied, we decide our path together, as true husband and wife. The simplicity of his statement contained multitudes, acknowledgement of their feelings, respect for her independence, commitment to their shared future. Sarah had fled Prescott seeking freedom from one man's control, never imagining she would find true partnership with another. An hour later, as they rode toward Fort Apache with the military escort, Sarah wore the wedding blanket draped across her shoulders, a visible symbol of her choice and her newfound place in the world. Behind them, William Blackwood sat slumped on his horse, defeated not by Apache weapons but by the realization that some things could not be purchased or possessed, only freely given. Spring had fully embraced the mountains by the time the matter was settled. At Fort Apache, Sarah had given her formal statement to authorities, confirming her presence among the Apache was entirely voluntary. Lieutenant Carter, displaying unexpected fairness, had filed charges against William and Marshal Davis for assault and abuse of authority. William's father had arrived, coldly furious at his son's humiliation. He'd attempted to leverage his considerable influence to have Sarah forcibly returned to Prescott, only to discover that Lieutenant Carter answered to a commander who valued justice over political connections. The territorial governor himself had finally intervened, dismissing all charges against the Apache and issuing a formal reprimand to the Blackwood mining interests for their son's actions. William had been sent east to manage family holdings far from Arizona, his reputation in tatters. 1 year later, Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, watching children gather for their daily lessons in the small clearing she had established as a school area. Logs arranged in a semicircle served as seats, while a flat piece of slate salvaged from an abandoned mining claim functioned as her writing board. Teacher, teacher, little voices called out as she approached. 8 Apache children and 3 from neighboring settler families waited eagerly, an integration that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Sarah settled among them, speaking in a mixture of Apache and English. Today we'll learn about plants that heal, she announced, displaying various specimens she had gathered that morning. As she guided the children through identifying each plant and its properties, she caught sight of Taze returning from a hunting expedition. Their eyes met across the camp, and even after a year of marriage, real marriage, the connection between them still sent warmth through her body. That evening, as they sat outside their lodge watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Taze handed her a letter that had arrived with a supply wagon. "From Territorial Governor," he explained. Sarah broke the official seal and scanned the contents, her expression growing increasingly surprised. "They're offering me a teaching position," she said finally, "at the new territorial school in Phoenix, with housing provided and the freedom to develop my own curriculum." Taze nodded, unsurprised. "Your reputation grows. Many speak of the white teacher living with Apache, teaching both people's children. They specifically mention that my unique cross-cultural experience would be valuable." Sarah laughed softly at the formal language describing her unconventional life. "They even invite you to accompany me, offering work as a scout and cultural liaison. Will you accept?" Taze asked, his tone neutral though his eyes watched her carefully. Sarah gazed out over the camp that had become her home. The smoke rising from cooking fires, women working at their crafts, children playing under watchful eyes. In this place, she had found not just refuge but purpose, not just survival but belonging. "No," she said simply. "My work is here." Relief softened Taze's features. "You could teach in big school. Many children. Better pay." "I'm already teaching the most important lessons," Sarah replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Our children here are learning to bridge two worlds. That's worth more than any salary." Taze's arm encircled her waist. "Two worlds. Like us." The observation was profound in its simplicity. They were indeed creatures of two worlds. Sarah with her books and formal education, Taze with his deep connection to the land and traditions. Together, they had created something new, a union that honored both heritages while transcending their boundaries. "I'll write to the governor," Sarah said. "Thank him for the offer but explain that I'm needed here. Though perhaps we could request books for our school and official recognition for the children's education." "Always thinking like teacher," Taze smiled, an expression he showed far more freely with her than with others. "Speaking of teaching," Sarah reached for a book beside her. A journal where she had been recording Apache stories and traditions, illustrated with pressed plants and careful drawings. "I've finished the first volume." Taze turned the pages reverently, seeing his people's oral history preserved in written form for the first time. "Important work. Keep stories safe for future." Sarah had begun the project after realizing how much Apache wisdom might be lost as the world around them changed. By documenting their medicinal knowledge, creation stories, and practical skills, she hoped to preserve at least some of their rich culture against the encroachment of Western expansion. As darkness settled over the mountain camp, they remained outside, pointing out constellations to each other. She naming them in English, he in Apache. The dual naming had become a habit, a small acknowledgement of their shared life between cultures. "Star people watch over us," Taze said, using the Apache term for the bright points of light overhead. "Yes," Sarah agreed, nestling closer to him as the night air cooled. "No matter what changes come, they remain constant. Like their love," she thought but didn't say aloud. Born in crisis, tempered through challenge, and now flourishing in the harsh but beautiful landscape that had brought them together. As constant and enduring as the mountains themselves.